Standing on the beach in Galveston, Texas, watching the water come in and go out. What you'll notice if you look close at the water is that with every wave that comes in, there's a little bit of sand that gets pushed up onto the beach. But there's a problem in Galveston. It's that when the wave goes out, every time it takes just a little bit more sand away than it leaves. The beaches in Galveston are shrinking by about 3 feet each year. And over time, this island is getting smaller and smaller just because of the erosion of the constant pull of the waves. When it comes to trying to live a pure life, there's no better illustration I can think of than this, because when we come to our struggles to live pure and to live holy, giving into temptation always takes a little bit more than it leaves. It always washes away a little bit more than it deposits. And so, standing here on this beach today thinking about the call to our generation to live holy, I can't help but think that we've got to come up with some solutions to live lives that are somehow more valuable when they're ended than they were when they've begun. Over the course of years, this island has faced storms, hurricanes that would come in and wash away whole sections of beach. Likewise, your life is going to face storms of temptation and storms of opportunity to give in to sin that are going to take things from you, that if you don't establish some things now that will help you stand firm, then the ground of your life just gets steadily smaller and smaller and smaller. I'd like to challenge you today to begin thinking about the way you live your life and to begin thinking about the commitments that you make and the way you decide to live, to make sure that the steady wash of our culture against our borders is not reducing the ground that you've staked out for God bit by bit and wave by wave. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "There is no temptation taken you but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it." God is in the escape route business. And so I would just remind you today, as you consider the pull of the waves on your life and the pull of temptations, to remember that God has a plan and God has a way in place for you to survive the temptation that comes against you and to outlast the things that would pull you away and would erode the boundaries of your life. Speaking of boundaries, in the year 1900, a Category 4 hurricane swept ashore on Galveston Island, killing roughly 12,000 people. After the storm and the cleanup process, the city of Galveston decided to build a seawall, which you see behind me. It's 17 feet tall, 16 feet thick. And effectively what it did was it raised the ground level of this island 17 feet overhead. Now, the wall that was built was more than enough for that storm. If it had been in place, the casualties would have been negligible. But what they did in constructing this seawall was anticipate a worse storm in the future, anticipate a storm that the waves were higher and the storm surge was greater. And so they built a seawall with enough height to withstand a storm that maybe they hadn't faced yet, but that they could face someday. Likewise, in our lives, when it comes to our commitments, sometimes you can't just depend on a commitment at this level because it may be enough for the storm you're facing now, but there's going to come a day when you face a storm that's going to over that commitment. So what you have to do is build the wall of your commitment high enough to anticipate whatever storm that you could face in the future. Maybe you think this is an extreme example. I don't have to build this high. I don't have to take this much precaution. Maybe not for where you are now, but let me just tell you, if you're not facing a more difficult storm now, at some point you will. And you've got to build commitments in your life that are high enough to withstand that storm, the greatest storm, the most difficult storm you'll ever face. A few years back, another hurricane came through, Hurricane Ike. Its storm surge was actually a little higher than the seawall. But the effect of the wall is that the storm surge that made its way into the city was only a couple of feet of water when it should have been 20 feet of water. In the same way, when it comes to our behavior, when it comes to drawing lines of moral purity and drawing lines of boundaries in our sexuality, you have to make some decisions. You have to decide that there are some lines I'm simply not going to cross because of the devastation that can follow. There are some lines in behavior, there are some lines in dating that I'm simply not going to cross. I'm going to build a boundary that's high enough. I'm going to draw a line that's far enough away from the danger zone that I can say, you know what, I'm going to stop here because I know if I take a step further, I'll wind up all the way over there. Today, in your discussion or in your small group session, I would advise you to spend some time talking about specific temptations that you face and some of the things that you feel like as a young adult that you deal with, and let's talk about it openly. And then ultimately, let's spend some time praying about it and deciding where you're going to draw lines and where you're going to build walls that will help you to deal with the temptations that are very real in our lives and in our society and in our culture, because it's a big problem. It's a huge problem when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to the struggle to maintain moral purity in a world that says absolutely anything you want to do is okay. I would just advise you today to spend some time in your group and spend some time alone with God, reminding yourself that it is truly worth the wait.